All right, everybody, welcome back to Cool's Reviews. As we're back with another review of Project Blue Book Season 1. It is kind of getting sad for us because the episodes for Season 1 are narrowing down. I mean, granted, we have watched both seasons, but at the same time, it makes it sad that we have less and less material to talk about, but who knows? We'll come back. We'll give you a top 10 ranking at some point because today we are at Episode 8 War Games. And I think this is another fun episode. The last two have been really cool, and I think they're going to play perfectly into where this story is going. Because if you remember, the last one was Scoutmaster, and it was about a fake Native American. Well, it was a Native American skull and burial site that they passed off as a fake alien. And this one, we'll get to it, but it ties into that, and it opens up some more cool little crosswebs and storylines that we won't really get resolved or see more into until season 2. But it's exciting. Sam is here, as you can see, as well as Matt. Now, Sam did tell me he has a lot to talk about with this episode, so it should make it a good one. So, this one starts off with what looks like a firefight between the army and some UFOs. It's pretty well made war footage that looks like it was from the time. And honestly, this episode starting to show you where they're going cinematography wise into season 2. I mean, you got some great angles. They use Dutch angles. They use lighting. I mean, at points it feels more like a horror film, and I think it starts to look really beautiful. Before we get too far, though, Sam, I'll kick it over to you because I know you said you had a lot to talk about, so I don't want to get into stuff before we let you tell us some of the topics you wanted to discuss.
A lot of the things that I want to talk about is going to be for a later standpoint, but I'll start it off with the video footage of this is a great example of like if you saw essentially like flares in the sky and how like their patterns move opposed from actual crafts moving in the sky. So to kind of kick it off with that one, that is like a good representation of like how flares would look in a video opposed from actual spacecrafts.
Yeah, and as someone that has personally seen military flares, we saw it one time coming back from the sand dunes late at night. At first, it could look a little bit like the Phoenix Lights, but then pretty quickly you see the flares drifting in a bunch of different patterns. I mean, they're not sticking around like the Phoenix Lights did or moving in the same pattern. So it's pretty intriguing. Hey, we're not sponsored by DoorDash. Put them back. I don't want to get into what they are seeing too much because that is a
Yes.
spoiler. Yeah. I mean, we're going to spoil stuff. So if you haven't seen it, go watch it as always and then come back, listen, comment, let us know. Do we wear our hats the wrong way? Let us know in the comments below. You
Keegan
know
does for
us.
sure.
You know us, just a couple Chris Pratts in the house today. Matt, what about you? At the opening of this, what are you feeling at the beginning of this episode?
No, I enjoyed it. I bought into it. It kind of looked, I don't know, it was great cinematography. They did a very well job on it, and it was good.
Yeah, and so of course Hynek and Quinn are investigating this. They're seeing the footage, and they want to get to the bottom of it because obviously at the beginning you're like, oh, it could be a battle with flying saucers. Who knows? I'm sure at the same time they're wondering maybe could be like the Soviets at this point in time. So they really want to know what's going on. We'll get to what's going on because it's definitely not the Soviets. We'll say that. We'll say that. But speaking of the Soviets, there is Susie at the beginning of this Soviet spy cleaning the trunk because the neighbor is missing. Now it's implied,
I
but
mean,
kind
it's
of
pretty obvious.
spoiler for at the end. Uh, I mean, yeah, if you watched the last episode, right?
If you watch the last episode, and he basically explains it in the beginning of this episode,
Yeah.
like her partner ends up killing the neighbor essentially, and she is left to clean up the mess, so get rid of the body and then kind of cover up everything else.
Yeah, and then that's kind of a little bit of a through line. They're not so much focused on. This one is definitely, again, more at Hynek and Quinn's um, storyline. But yeah, we do see little tidbits here and there. Susie
I mean, there
teaching
is a big
Mimi,
pretty part between like the Susie and
Mimi,
Minnie. Mimi?
Mimi, Mimi
Mimi.
Hynek. Yeah, where
Yeah.
she's teaching her to shoot. Susie is the spy, so she has pretty good aim, pretty excellent aim. And
I
so
mean, Mimi definitely did too, because she like missed one and then hit every other shot.
yeah, it's about focus. You know, if you kind of get it down, because I think you go in there blind shoot, you most likely will miss. And I think that's kind of what she was doing at first. And then, of course, going back to Mimi, we see that the police are kind of staked out because the husband of the neighbor did call because she's missing, and so that's kind of it for that side of the story.
I mean, yes, but also she kind of confronts him at the end of this one, keeping secrets of stuff just because of that whole incident.
Hmm.
Which again was a part of the last one, because the last one he kind of told her about a bunch of stuff as well.
Did he
It
already show
was,
her the piece?
yeah, because he
Yeah,
no longer has that piece, so he
yeah.
had to have shown it to her, and then was asked to keep it back in the trunk of the car.
Well, and I think another big part of hiding it there is because they were looking for it, like they knew it was missing, so he didn't want to have it like in his house.
True, but like they would also check the car too,
I
technically.
mean, for sure, for sure. But yeah, so we'll get back. They go to the military base, and man, these people look like some stuff has been happening. You know, they look like something's going on, be it mental, physical, drugs, uh,
Yeah, it looked
mind
like they were
control.
kind of drugged
Yeah,
for sure. They definitely looked like there was something like they were introduced to that was like really messing them up.
For sure.
yeah. I mean, and then at parts they're kind of shaking, other parts they're banging their head against the wall. Like they're doing some pretty strange stuff. Where the one guy was like, his eyes were rolling back. He was kind of like having a seizure. And so you're like, whoa, what's going on? Is it the UFOs? So Harding and Valentine are interrogating one of the soldiers. And like I said, he starts kind of looks like he's going into like a seizure or a fit. But at the same time, the lights are acting up and he's like, they're here.
Wells, that was from their project that Hynek came across their like kind of testing site where it's not really testing, it's more of like mind controlling site essentially, like a project that the CIA did and like in real life, but like the military also did this as well. Wells was like one of their project people, completed their training supposedly, and so they brought him in to kind of communicate with the extraterrestrials, and seemed like he did, or just like communicate with something, because like there was a lot of weird stuff that happened, like the light would go brighter and dimmer, and then like his cup of water like just started to just straight boil, and then he was still touching the cup, which was very interesting as well.
Well, and
But
like when he's running down the hallway, the bulbs are like exploding.
yeah, all the bulbs were exploding, but like behind him, underneath him, like when he would go under one, it would explode
Hmm.
after the initial explosion. And then he kind of like took off. And then you see him later in the episode when Dr. Hynek and Quinn almost run him over.
Right. Yeah. And so, kind of jumping a little bit back and going back to Hynek and Quinn, they're in the field and there's like this big flock of birds. Pretty good size, I would say. And all of a sudden, they're like just dropping dead.
Mm-hmm.
And like,
Like Hynek was explaining it that it was like a mating pattern where they would like move in and out of each other into like these like complex patterns.
Mhm.
But then all of a sudden they like kind of turned and started to attack each other, essentially, just like the Marines were. So they came to that conclusion.
Yeah, and that's kind of where, because you see Hynek dissecting one of them, and you definitely know, okay, something's going on. And
Mhm.
earlier, you're like, maybe it's swamp, some with the swamp, because it does show a lot of swampy area. Maybe there's swamp gas, something like that going on, messing with these people's minds. Again, not what it is. We'll find out. The birds definitely hold a clue, and Hynek is pretty on point. He's like, this is odd. They just don't do that. But
Asked for like quarantine of people that were affected of that night,
mhm.
keeping them separate from the rest of the crew, and then just like monitoring them, seeing if it starts to become like a built up aggression towards each other, then they would definitely quarantine and would like challenge Quinn at some points. He was just like, "Do you feel more hostile towards me more than normal?" And he was just like, "Well, no."
Yeah, no, the banter between the two is always so good. Like, great casting for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so we get to a part in this where they split up, and Quinn goes with some like a group of the army people, and they are all very much on edge. Like the one
Mhm.
guy is like all suspicious of Quinn. The other guy, like I said earlier, banging his head on the wall.
Well,
Everyone's
on the
just like,
back of a truck.
yeah, on the back of the truck, and they're all just like sweating, and they just don't look like they're in their right mind. And you see, like Quinn, like release the safety, just like he's like, I don't know what's gonna happen.
No, absolutely not. And then Hynek kind of gets the feeling of it, like he's just like, "No, you shouldn't go." And like after he departs, he like immediately starts to follow them with his car.
He doesn't want anything to happen, and he has his suspicions already from the birds.
Oh yeah, no, he has the right suspicions because he notices that like it's something not from the supposed sighting, but there's something going on with that area.
And so, yeah, they end up stopping because they're all kind of freaking out. They get out and they all kind of surround Quinn, and he's like, "Give me your weapon," and Quinn's like, "No, we're all on the same team." Blah blah blah. And that's when Hynek pulls up, and that's enough distraction for him to knock kind of their leader down. And Hynek kind of plays along. This was a mind control. We're just testing, getting ready to see how you're doing. Blah blah blah. Just see, how
How
you'd
the
react.
response is.
Yeah. And they're like, "You're lying." He's like, "Good. That's what I want you to say." And it's kind of funny because, again, he doesn't know how right he is on some of that stuff.
I mean, I think he has a good idea of how right he is on it.
Mm, we don't. As the audience, you might not know, though. Some weird stuff going on. They get distracted, they look off the side, and that's when Hynek and Quinn make an escape. And, man, you
Well,
don't
they
know
get
if
a call from like the main base that is just
that
like, "Are
they're
you guys in
back.
position?"
Well, and then somebody said they're back.
Well, that was the dude that like never left the truck. Like everybody leaves the truck besides the one dude that was banging his head back on like the wall.
Hmm.
He stayed in the truck while everybody else got out per the like uh, essentially the commander's orders to get out. And so he stayed in it, and then that dude started getting up and like kind of like looking around, but like was looking through the like tent canvas of the like the carrier trucks that they have. And so then
Hmm.
he started to fire off in the air saying that they were back, and then which distracted everybody because they all like kind of turned and looked, and so then they darted off into the woods after command called them, being like, "No, this isn't a test. Get to your positions, like, or else you guys are AWOL."
This is a point where they stumble across the remains of mortars, Hynek and Quinn.
Well,
And
no, it's not to that point yet because then they run into Dr. Wells, which then Wells finds the artifact that Dr. Hynek kind of took
mm,
per the Men in Black's request, essentially, as I'm going to call them, the Man in the Hat, as he refers to him as.
mm,
But he finds the artifact, so then he darts off into the woods, so then they give chase, and then they come across the mortars.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's just like freaking out in the car and just like tears the back seat open to get the artifacts. And then yeah, he just runs off in the woods. Quinn tries to like go get him and he kicks Quinn's ass. Just like
Oh yeah,
not even.
he has some like intense strength or just like very drive.
Which again, if they were all drugged, which is kind of where we're gonna get to, it would explain.
I mean,
that.
true, but like also that dude wasn't there from the essential happening of it happening. He was brought in the same time that they were brought in, essentially.
Yeah, but again, as another test, put them,
True.
put them
Well,
in, and
they were trying to. He was trying to like they were bringing him in to communicate with the beings because that's what they thought they were.
so then like after he escapes, because Hynek has to make a choice: does he go after him? He just saw what he did to Quinn, or does he try to help Quinn? And obviously, he's like, that guy just kicked Quinn's ass. I'm going to try to help Quinn.
And
You
he's
know,
like, "I'm not a soldier. I can't fight.
yeah,
I'm
and
a professor."
yeah, so he, goes helps them, and after a while, that's when they do find the mortars, and it's like everything starts to click
Mm-hmm.
between the birds, the mortars, and they realize there was no UFOs. It was all an actual test to
Mm-hmm.
see how the soldiers would react. And like, what did they say they were on?
I'm trying to remember. I think it was like a psychiatric something that like it was under like certain.
Yeah, I mean, so the military was staging this whole thing just to kind of see how their men would react. And Harding and Valentine definitely seemed like they actually did not know that that was going on.
No, because essentially they were doing that, but then they also wanted to see if they were continuing a project that the one is he the Secretary of Defense?
Yeah. He's definitely going to come up towards the end of this season. I know for sure he plays a big
Yeah,
part.
the Secretary of Defense was also testing them to see if they like were continuing a project that he essentially shut down, which then he found out that they were still continuing with that project that he shut down. And he was just like, I was just trying to see if you were obeying orders, and so this was like a test for you guys. Which is kind of funny because Quinn was tested by them, and now they're being tested by their higher up. So
Right.
it was
Yeah.
kind of like it's an
Payback
interesting
in a
back
way.
to back.
Yeah.
And then there was also that part where like Quinn, you can also tell that like Quinn was like challenging them, being like, "You guys knew this the whole time," and then like they look like they didn't know, and
Yeah.
so he starts to like even question it more, being like, "Wait, so we're doing this, but you guys aren't even being told either." So he's just starting to start questioning a lot of their tactics.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of that scene from episode one where Qui Gon's like, there's always a bigger fish.
Mm-hmm.
Because here Quinn in the last episode thought he was actually interrogating that guy, finds it's a setup from Harding to test him, and now look, Harding and Valentine were being tested, didn't even know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, oh, how many more levels of this is there?
I
Crazy.
mean, that's kind of how the branches of the military goes, though.
Yeah. Well, and then too, like kind of going back to Quinn again, last episode he was pretty infuriated with Harding. So that crack was starting to form.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is just like taking that, what was that chisel that Max Hawthorne showed us?
Mm-hmm.
It's like taking that in a log and just like slowly splitting it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're gonna see as that series goes through, you're gonna see what happens to them. And
Oh yeah.
no,
But
this
now that
is
we've gotten to this part, the things that I wanted to talk about is like that whole test with the military most likely happened within the military. They did tests of that stuff. But it even goes above and beyond that because they've also, in secret, have been testing the human populace or all the civilians as well. Because if you look at a bunch of crazy diseases that have popped up out of nowhere, those are all kind of like experiments that are either were released intentionally or unintentionally. Like a good example is like the Lyme disease that was hitting the East Coast for a while. There's also a bunch of other stuff that was like unintentionally released. A good topic is like the Plum Island incidences, and then how Plum Island was shut down, and then now there's like research facilities throughout the United States in like multiple different states that are not on an island anymore. But then a lot of weird and interesting things like kind of pop up around those facilities. So this is definitely something that does happen, and unfortunately, like a lot of the civilians are almost test experiments or like test dummies and experiments for some of these things unintentionally or slash intentionally as well. And that's kind of what I wanted to bring up with this episode, along with it just being like one of their like excuses where it's a military flare.
Yeah, I mean, I know there was that investigation by the government into the Lyme disease because there was reports that it was like released, but I don't know about like the Soviets in the Cold War. But I don't. I'd
I
have
don't
to
think it was the Soviets. I'm pretty sure it was us testing it because like where Lyme disease is, it was pretty close to where Plum Island was.
Yeah, and I know we've talked
And a
about
lot
Plum
of weird
Island.
things would show up on Plum Island. Like they would see a lot of the weird stuff like wash up on shore. And that was like the same time that they created the like the zombie survival guides, and like the like in case of a zombie outbreak, they created that thing within the what was that? It's not. It's like the actual documents or like not actual procedures that they like release with like hurricane survival. They created the like the zombie survival. What is that under? I forget off the top
Well,
of
I know like Plum Island, a big thing that they studied or had
the
kind of there
CDC. Was that
was foot and mouth disease. If I remember correct, was something that Plum Island studied.
the CDC things about the zombies and like that type of stuff? Because like there was incidences of where things would wash up on shore that were like really mutated and then also like almost dead like. So that's when they like released that like those like preparations for like the public to like look into.
Yeah, so foot and mouth disease did escape at one point in a couple animals from Plum Island. I was doing some,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no pictures. I was gonna try. I mean, it just shows a bunch of cows.
Right. Yeah, but there was like some weird mutated things that would wash up on shore, and like soon before or like soon after or before Plum Island was kind of like shut down for their research stuff was when Lyme disease came out, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, Lyme
And then,
disease was reported in the 1970s,
mhm, which
and
was,
Plum Island was opened in the late 90s.
I think it was open earlier than that.
No, but it was still like going on till I think 2000s.
Yeah, you're probably right about that, but I'm pretty sure Lyme disease was something that was released from there as like a test. But now they have facilities like throughout the United States, as like actual states. I think there's one in Connecticut. I think there's another one.
Yeah, so Lyme disease was first described in 1977.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
But essentially, this episode is talking about like biochemical warfare. Is essentially what it is kind of talking about, like us testing soldiers under like certain conditions or testing like a biochemical thing that they would use in warfare.
So Plum Island is on the New Hampshire side
Mm-hmm.
of Massachusetts.
Yep.
And then below it is Rhode Island. I know every once in a while you'll see that picture of that turtle body circulating, but that was not from. I think that was in the Carolinas or Florida. It's just a turtle that's been decomposed. It's kind of like, have you ever seen a decomposed basking shark? Looks so weird.
Yes, it does.
People used to like report seeing like shaggy sharks, and that's definitely was like probably carcass of like a basking shark. So that's why I like doing those weird. We'll definitely have to do that. Yeah, at the end, the Men in Black get the piece, as we see. The guy in the hat that we've been seeing. He finds the artifact and picks it up, and it looks like it was actually reforming into itself. Like it looks like it had opened up at some point, and then it was like closing in on itself. And so
it's very possible. Like it
yeah,
reacted to him having it, and that's what essentially possibly killed him.
or he
And then they
used it
came
on
across it.
something. Yeah.
Or he used it because, like, when he had it in his hand, you could definitely tell that it was glowing red and it was doing something.
Yeah, like it had a weird, like red, like almost like those like tracker lights you'd see. That's kind of what it looked like.
Mm-hmm. Like it was going along, like the angles of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was probably reacting, or something was happening, or something triggered it.
Oh, don't do that.
And
You're
then it
making me.
potentially fired off, which ended up killing Wells. And then he ended up getting the piece before, or he ended up like throwing the piece because the piece wasn't with his body when the dude found it.
And
So
you
like
think
they
they
ended
would
up
have found
finding,
it?
yeah, they ended up finding his body, and then like the man in the hat ended up grabbing the piece later on or earlier. So it's hard to say when he ended up grabbing it because he could have grabbed it beforehand, and then he was the one that ended up triggering it to be released or something. Hard to say.
Well, no, I do like that part, kind of talking about the piece when Quinn finds out that it was Hynek that took something, and he was just like, "I knew it was you."
Right?
So
And then when he explained it, he was just like, he was still like puzzled by it. He was just like, that stuff is under like intense like security and like guard. Like, how did you get that? And he
yeah,
was just like, that dude, he gave me the key to it and told me how to get to it.
yeah, which is
It's
a
just like,
little
that's weird.
Easter egg for like, where did that guy come from? How does he have like these connections? And we'll find out for
It's
sure.
access to a lot of stuff. Oh,
Yeah.
yep, it's coming.
Yeah, so I think that is where we'll end it, this episode at least. We got two more to go for season one, and we will get back to you guys and discuss like a tier list of the first season and kind of recap where it is, and maybe we'll do another series between the first and the second, and then come back with fresh eyes again on the second, even though we have two episodes from season two on YouTube already. But
Mm-hmm.
Sam, where would you rate this one? And would you recommend it?
I mean, I'm always going to go with a 10 out of 10 as usual, and I definitely recommend it because I really enjoy the Project Blue Book series, so I will always recommend it to people. It's really good, and it's also a, a program that actually existed, and they have lots of lots of documented things about it. Whether you can find those documented like evidences, this is just some of the ones that they did. Like they were around for a good amount of time, and they did a lot of cases, and this is only showcasing like some of them out of the many that they have done. So I definitely enjoy this project. It definitely like helps kind of show the public that this type of stuff has been happening, and there's some accounts that are actually very, very hard to deny, and then there's others that are obviously hoaxed. That's why hoping with this new,
I will say, kind of going with the disclosure and the
yeah,
congressional hearings.
Congress. That was what I was thinking. Yeah, with the whole Congress disclosure, maybe Project Blue Book would come back for a third season, which would be amazing because there's still a lot of questions, and there's also still a lot of cases that they can kind of showcase and explain to the world, which would be pretty cool. So hopefully they can come back and continue to do what they are doing.
Yeah, and I was just, when you were talking about the congressional hearing, it made me think back to when we were talking about that and then the Mexican mummy UFO. Because reading Gerard's book, he actually brought up the first Mexican mummy event where it turned out to be a hoax using a infant carcass, like mummified infant with deformities that this guy tried to pass off as a mummy of an alien. Matt, what about you?
I thoroughly enjoyed this one. I'm going to go with Sam. 10 out of 10 on this one. I do highly recommend the Project Blue Book. The more I get into it, the more I'm enjoying the series. Definitely one that you could easily binge watch.
And I have many times.
Mm-hmm. When we do the tier list, we're gonna have to actually rank them. It's gonna be hard, Sam.
Yeah, that's gonna be tough.
All number one.
No, that's not how that works.
That's how it
For
works in
me,
my opinion, technically.
yeah, but that's not how our tier list works.
Keegan, did you just say 1 out of 10? What's wrong with you?
No, I said that's not how a tier list works. For me, I'd probably say like an 8 out of 10. It's not my favorite of this season, but it's definitely really good.
Well, out of the 8 so far, right? You're not like grading this one on the ones that haven't happened yet, right?
Well, technically, we've done 10 at this point.
Technically.
Yeah, but you kind of jumped the gun on season 2 just because of where
You
we
jumped
were
the
going.
gun on season 2.
I didn't.
You watched the entire season 2.
I mean, yes, because I wanted to watch both of them, but I didn't review season 2 before we were finished with season 1.
Well, I'm also only basing it off of the first 7 ahead of it right now. Because there's some really good ones in season 1. And so I'm just trying to think.
Oh, no, there absolutely is.
And that's why I like kind of distinguishing the grades so people know. I mean, it's still a really good grade. I just want to be like, no, this one's definitely my favorite of the season.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're getting there. I know one of these episodes is really, really good towards the end of this one. So, yeah, no, that's our review. At some point, maybe we'll do deep dives of each one. Actually, this would probably be a better one to do a crossover of Spirits of the Silver Screen with Weekly Abductions, where they talk about the actual investigations. We try to see what Project Blue Book stuff we can find. But if you guys want to see more Cool's reviews, click that link to your left. For more about us here at Cool's Paranormal, click the link to your right. Don't forget to hit that like and give us a subscribe.
And switch that notification bell from personalized to all if you want to be notified on all of our upcoming videos.
And let us know, what did you think of this episode? And so far, out of the first 8, what is your favorite?